Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path. So I did do a map for this one because we skip around a bit and we cover a lot of ground today. So starting off from Mt Selwyn, we head back down the summit track onto the Mt Selwyn Road, follow that south along here, head down the Water Spur Track onto the Humffray River Track, an old favourite of mine, take that to the end, then back up the Hart Spur Track and then onto the Mount Hart Track and heading back towards Mt Sarah. From Mt Sarah, we continue back north on the Two Tree Range Road, past the top end of the Water Spur Track again, double up a little bit, sneak across to the Selwyn Creek Road, and then onto the western end of the Twins Jeep Track. Take the Twins Jeep Track to Mount Murray, and then from Mount Murray, we head back down and cover the rest of the Twins Jeep Track. Now, most of this I didn't end up putting in the video because it would have just been too long, and I have done the Twins Track before on the channel. Drop off the end of the Twins Jeep Track onto Guns Track. There is some footage in the video around Mount Sugarloaf. I love this area, and the lighting here was just magical. Looking the best I've seen it. So a little bit of footage there, and then most of the rest of this is not on the video, but we take the West Ovens track back to Harrieville and air up. So that's the trip for today, guys. Covering a lot of ground, but it's really about showing the Grenadier in a few different areas. So let's get into it. Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, picking up where we left off. So we're up on top of the summit of Mt Selwyn and heading off. Now we're going to cover a bit of ground in this video, a lot more than we normally would, because at the end of the day, this has been about showing you guys the Grenadier and its first steps off-road. Yeah, look, as you can see, for those that ask if we ever run into people coming the other way, that's exactly what's happened just here. We're literally, just as we're about to leave the Selwyn summit, there's some other vehicles heading straight up. So we've obviously reversed and given them the clear right away to get up on the summit. A lot easier for us to reverse than for them to try and make way for us. So, and I'm just trying to move off to the side there because there's two or three of them coming up, and trying to make sure that we've got enough room. Now there was one in their convoy that wasn't able to make it up this last little rutted wombat hole section here, so it's a lot steeper and a lot rougher than it looks on camera. Some of these wombat holes here are pretty deep, and yeah, that's not the first vehicle that I've seen not make it up, that's for sure. So we're going to, as I said, we're going to cover a fair bit of ground today. We're heading down off the Mt Selwyn summit, and yeah, so just making my way past the ranger there, and we're going to head along towards Mt Sarah on the Two Tree Range Track, and then down Water Spur Track, and then along the Humffray River Track. And again, anyone who has been a long time follower of the channel will know these are places that I've driven a lot, and that was the exact idea of this trip, was to drive tracks that I knew and knew well, so that I've got a benchmark to compare how the Grenadier handles and performs. So yeah, we've covered a few Ks already here. We're on the Two Tree Range Track here, coming up on the Water Spur turn off, where we descend down to Humffray River. So yeah, in that little cut there, we have covered probably about 6-8 Ks, more than that, even more like 10. So yeah, we turned onto Water Spur Track, which at the very top here starts off pretty flat, but it doesn't take long. it's a pretty steady descent. And again, I have driven Water Spur Track multiple times. Some of you might remember January last year I was coming up Water Spur with my buddy Kieran from the North Coast, and his Pajero ran out of fuel about a third of the way up Water Spur, so we had to go and get him some petrol. Made for a long afternoon, long night. We're not doing that today. So yeah, heading down the Water Spur Track. It's about 7 kilometres long. Descends from about 1,475 metres at the top down to approximately 540 metres at the bottom. So it's around 900 metres descent or so. So a pretty steady descent. Really good opportunity for me to test the engine braking with the Grenadier. I did play around a little bit with the hill descent control. I'm not sure that I did that on this particular section, but mostly I just wanted to get used to the engine braking and compare that to the 76 and see how that all feels. And this was a really good track to have the opportunity to do that. The other thing being solid axle but coil sprung, get a sense of how it flexes compared to the 70, and it certainly flexes a lot more on the rear than the 70 did with the leaf springs. This gives you a little bit of an idea of the Water Spur Track and how steep it is. Unfortunately, my GoPro inside the car ran out of battery and I didn't have a charger for it, so I don't have any more footage of the attitude gauge there. Looking for a steepish track to test your vehicle out on, Water Spur is a great one to try out. I should point out that Water Spur Track and Humffray River Track are both tracks that are seasonally closed. So of course this was filmed in December of 2024, and the seasonal closures take effect from June long weekend through to end of October, start of November. Some are slightly different than others. So right now, at the moment when this video is published, this is a seasonally closed track. You get some great views off the Water Spur Track heading down here as well. Looking across towards the range. On the other side of that range that we're looking at is the Grenadier Valley. And you can hear the engine revving a little bit as it's picking up a little bit of speed, and the engine braking is holding that gear. Generally, I was in second, sometimes third, depending what sort of pace I wanted to maintain. Third gear in this is probably equivalent to second gear in the 76. In terms of what sort of speed you'll see you maintaining, and obviously the humps there to divert water off the track to also have the added benefit of slowing you down as you're heading down the track. And that is the 7 kilometres of Water Spur Track covered, and we're now heading on to Humffray River Track. So Humffray River Track is 8 kilometres long, and again I picked this track for this sort of shakedown trip for the Grenadier because it's got some steep climbs. There's a really good rutted section. It's got a few little river crossings, they're rarely very deep, and at this time of year they certainly weren't going to be deep, because the Grenadier does have a raised air intake, not a snorkel. Like the 70 series, it comes with a raised air intake rather than a sealed snorkel. So here's our first river crossing on the Humffray River Track. A little bit of a run and entry there, but nothing too difficult, and as expected the water levels are not very high. Nice easy crossing, and a pretty straightforward exit on this particular crossing as well. Always a great ride, very scenic, the Humffray River Track. And after that initial crossing, you do climb up away from the river, and this is one of several decent climbs. This one's starting to develop a few ruts. It's often got a little bit of loose gravel on it. Traction can be a bit interesting at times, and you can see those ruts sort of forming, and it's just a good steady climb. Grenadier certainly has plenty of power for climbing hills like this, and the gearing with the 8-speed transmission makes really light work of it. The only time you hear it revving hard is when I've got it in a manual gear and I'm perhaps holding that gear a little longer than I should, or trying to drive a little faster than I should in that particular gear. So again, just working our way through that section there that's a little chewed up, and onto a flatter, easier section of this climb now. And all in all, making pretty short work of it. If you haven't done Humffray River Track, I definitely recommend it. Coming down this other side, this section of track's been developing ruts for years. Now, not knowing how much clearance I've got, I've elected to span the ruts rather than drop into them, because I don't have a winch on the Grenadier at this point. So, you know, if I drop in there and belly out, I do have Dave behind me in his 300, but yeah, I didn't really want to belly the vehicle out on its first trip off road. So yeah, I have elected to span those ruts and sit up on the high point. And it's nice and dry conditions, traction's good, so you're doing that in the wet, you've kind of got to drop into the ruts because it does get very slippery. It's a clay base, but today, no issue. You can see there, people have dropped wood and everything into those holes there, trying to pack them up. I'm glad I didn't get sort of dragged into that mess. And yeah, that section of track's getting sort of worse and worse. And yeah, you might remember going up that in the 76, I diffed out. That was again on that trip with Kieran, and he did have to winch me up there. I had gone down there in the 76. Obviously the weight momentum going downhill, that pushed down alright, probably dragged the diffs a little bit. So all those sort of things considered, I didn't want to drop into the ruts with the Grenadier. Running the same size tyres on the Grenadier as I did on the 76, so presumably a similar amount of clearance under the diffs, and very conscious of that steering dampener as well. I wasn't super keen at ripping that off. So yeah, down the other side, along a little bit of a flat section there, and we're onto our next river crossing, which again is not deep. Only once have I come through here, and that was sort of at the tail end of a couple of days of decent rain in the high country, and they were sort of almost bonnet deep, these crossings at that time. But generally they're like what you're seeing here now, lucky to be sort of halfway up your tyres, maybe 300-400 mil deep. So yeah, another nice easy crossing there. And onto another flat section of track. Tree fall there with a bypass working its way around it, which is what you tend to see happen on these tracks. They end up with these bends in them, usually because a tree's fallen and everybody just drives around it. So, not surprisingly, yet another crossing. I forget exactly how many there are on the Humffray River Track, but there's a few, maybe 5, 6 crossings, something like that. So this is almost a three-way crossing with another little stream feeding into the Humffray River right there. The exit on this side is a little more chewed up, but in the nice dry conditions we've got today, it's not going to present much of a challenge. We heard just a little bit of wheel spin there as the traction control kicked in. And as I said, this being sort of a bit of a shakedown trip for the Grenadier, I wasn't going out looking for the hardest stuff to wheel, so rarely used the lockers on this trip. Might have used them once or twice, probably mostly just to get used to pressing the button more than anything. The traction control pretty much was able to handle almost everything that I came across on this particular trip. Nice low-hanging tree there as we approach the next crossing. Very flat, easy entry. Straight across to the exit. Another clip there, lost the audio unfortunately. And after that, yeah, we're passing the Humffray River shelter, which I didn't go in to show you guys today. I have been in there and showed you before. Little freestanding shelter, very popular with hunters. Great spot for them to set up camp and set up their swags under the shelter there. If you're brave enough, it's got a bit of a lean to it. It's been standing a long time though. So yeah, that's when you come down Waterspur Track, the shelter's about halfway along the 8 kilometres of Humffray River Track. So we've covered about 4 k's, and as you can see after that, again, this is another section of track that deviates away from the river, and we're straight into a good climb here, nice and steady. This tends to have quite good traction, starting to get a little bit rutted a little further up. And again, you can hear the engine of the Grenadier revving there. That's me holding the gear in manual, and that's a lot less necessary than I'm doing in this case. The way they've programmed the auto on this thing, you can just drive it in drive most of the time, going up and down hills. Only on the really steep stuff do you want to sort of manually try and hold the gears and flick it across to that manual selection. So you can see here, this is sort of the steeper, more rutted section. A few little wombat holes starting to form in this section. It is quite a long hill and quite a steady climb. You literally go up one side and then down the other side. You can see how much the front end of the Grenadier is moving there. I have seen people tow camper trailers up and over this, so yeah, it's certainly not that difficult to drive. I don't know if maybe something small like a Patriot I'd try towing, but yeah, I don't know if I'd tow my dot up over here. So yeah, bonus track on the left there. I've never actually driven up that. I assume it just goes up to the top of the hill and nowhere else, and then you turn around and come back down. The number of times I've driven Humffray River Track, and I've just never taken the time to drive that. One of these days I've got to do that. I had planned to cover a fair bit of ground today, so yeah, didn't take the time on this particular trip with the Grenadier. And again, no winch, and I wasn't looking to have any surprises today. Being the first time I've taken this car off-road, you know, I've only owned it at this point about a week. And we're just starting that descent down the other side, back towards the river. This side of the hill can have some loose gravel sitting on top of it. Traction can be a bit of an issue, and again, you might remember from the January trip in the 76, open diffs in the 76, and no traction control. Coming up one section, I think it was this section here, I just lost traction and ended up needing Kieran to actually winch me up. Well, I used my winch because I had a winch in the 76, but he ran the winch rope out for me. So while not a difficult track, if you've got a vehicle with open diffs, traction can sometimes be an issue. That is the only time I've ever had to winch on that particular trip in the 76 on this track. I've driven this track probably 5-6 times, and just that one time. So back down to the river, and yet another crossing where you drive down the stream a little bit. This one, and you can see the bottom there through the water. It's again not very deep. Nice easy crossing. And it's in this section, it's not too long at all before you're coming to another crossing. This entrance exit is pretty chewed up. I've driven this multiple different ways and have come to the consensus that straight down the middle of this big washed out section is pretty much the best way to drive it. Taking the 76 down this way, the rear tow bar would always hit. Grenadier does have a much better departure angle than the 76. Trade-off for that is you've got less space behind the rear seats. The cargo area is slightly smaller than the 76. But as you can see there, it came down it without hitting the tow bar at all. This is another crossing where you head down the stream a little further than the last one. And there's the exit straight ahead. This side's a little bit chewed up, but nothing like the other side. And when it's bone dry like this, it's a very easy drive to get up and out. That crossing is probably more challenging going back the other way, where you've got to climb up that really washed out exit. And as you can see here, literally 50 metres, and the river's wrapped around with another crossing, but a much shorter crossing here, straight across, with a nice, easy, shallow access ramp either side. So, you know, if you're looking for some high country river crossings, assuming there hasn't been any recent rain. Humffray River Track is great for that. Multiple crossings, and as long as there's not been recent rain, they're definitely very deep. Speaking of multiple river crossings, we're approaching the next one here. A little bit of a rocky entrance here. Not difficult, just lumpy. Another very picturesque crossing. See some decent sized rocks there to the left. Just stay on the line. And again, the exit here, chewed up a little bit, but it's not overly steep. And today, not slippery at all. You can see that when it's wet, obviously, that's a clay-based exit ramp there. It's going to be wet, slippery, and a whole different ballgame to what it is today. And once again, after those couple of river crossings, we find ourselves climbing up away from the river for a short time. There's a rabbit that just ran across the track there. Almost a bit of a spur track at this section on the Humffray River Track. And of course, once again, we're descending, working our way back down towards the river, getting close to the end of the Humffray River Track, and our next track after this is going to be the Hart Spur Track. So there's this little pinch here. This is how you know when you're getting to the end of Humffray River. It's reasonably steep. There's always only a drip of water in the bottom of it, but it's a steep entrance and exit. And again, I would always hit the tow bar on the 76 coming through here, not on the Grenadier. That's why I'm taking that so slow though, because every time I went through there in the 76, bang, that rear tow bar would hit. As soon as you pop out the other side, you're at this intersection here where the Hart Spur Track joins on the left. Again, you might remember from our January trip last year with Dan and Paul and Luca, of course, we went up Hart Spur. So that was the first time I'd ever driven it, and again, it just made for a really good loop today. So taking that hard left and heading up the Hart Spur Track. Hart Spur Track is 8 kilometres, takes you back up to the Mt Hart Track, which will then loop us back to Mt Selwyn. The start of the Hart Spur Track is fairly flat. Little campground there just on the right hand side. And as you come around the corner here, there is a little stream crossing. Again, not something that you're going to have to worry about having a snorkel for. Barely enough to wet the bottom of your tyres. A reasonably steep little pinch. And I don't think the Hart Spur Track is driven all that often. It's reasonably enclosed, and the Mt Hart Track at the top, if I'd have remembered how tight that is with foliage, I may not have chosen to take my newly purchased car down that track, at least until after I had some protective film on it. But anyway, we went this way, as you'll see. So once you pass that initial section, it does start to climb. The track for the Hart Spur track is generally in pretty good nick. It was a little bit more wild when we drove it in January because it had just started to rain, and we were concerned. We were sort of trying to get up as quick as we could. We were concerned what that was going to do to traction. Bone dry today, as you can see, clear blue skies, certainly no threat of rain. You can see here the track's pretty well chewed up. The left-hand line is probably less chewed up than the right. I've sort of opted to go through the middle there just to sort of see how the traction control goes and how it responds to different surfaces. And you would have just heard those two sort of wheel spins there as the weights come off a couple of tyres driving through some wombat holes there, and the traction control was kicked in, stopped those tyres from spinning and pushed the drive to the other wheels, and we've kept moving with a minimum of fuss. That's somewhere where the 76 I probably would have had to reset if I'd taken that same line. Not having the traction control to kick in for it. So again, it keeps climbing. Hart Spur is basically the reverse of the Water Spur in that they both run essentially between the same two tracks, because the Mount Hart track runs back to Mt Selwyn and then into the Tea Tree Range Road, which will take you back past the top of the Water Spur track. So Water Spur is 7 k's down, Hart Spur is 8 k's back up. Again, you can see there, a little bit rough. Good steady climb. Those of you that clicked on the thumbnail, did I break something already? The part that's referring to is coming up not too far away. But for the moment, we're still making our way up the Hart Spur track. Decently steep climb. A little bit of loose rock on top and some ruts just sort of starting to form. Another couple of years, I think this track will get a lot more interesting, if they don't grade it before then. You can see the ruts forming through there. I've opted to drive on the high spots again. Still thinking about that steering dampener. It's not something that I hear a lot about people damaging, and I did ask on the Grenadier forums about it, and only one person responded and said, yeah, look, I broke mine, and yeah, the steering's a bit heavy without it, but it's fine, you just keep driving. So it's not a showstopper if you do break it, but I did get a spare to take on the Tripton Flinders Rangers, which will start next video after this. So yeah, as you can see, this is pretty much the reverse of Waterspur Track. It just keeps going up and up and up. Really steady climb. Good drive if you like driving steeper tracks and like long hills. The main challenge with this though is when you get to the top, you've really only got one way to go, because you can turn right, that takes you to Mount Hart, but that's a dead end track. So you're either turning around and coming back down, or you're turning left and heading north on the Mount Hart track towards Tea Tree Spur or Mt Selwyn, and the track is very enclosed, so you're going to get some pinstripes. Again, just taking it slow and steady there. is, yeah, as I've said many times, just handling all this with minimum of fuss. Ride's really comfortable as well. That's probably one of the big things. The suspension's tuned very well. I found the cabin doesn't move as much as the 76 did. Much as you're seeing a little bit of movement when you're watching the front of the vehicle in the camera here. The ride inside the cabin, you don't get sort of tossed around quite so much as I did in the 76. And yeah, this top end of the Hart Spur Track closes in a little bit as well with the foliage. And yeah, we've just made it to the top of the Hart Spur Track and just continued left onto the Mount Hart Track, heading towards Mt Selwyn. So that was 7 Ks. We've got about another 7 kilometres along here to get to Mt Selwyn. As I mentioned on the way up, it's a really tight track. I don't think it gets driven all that much, and you've got a lot of foliage enclosed on both sides. A few sections like this do open up. Now I've cut a lot out here because I have shown this track before, and this video really wasn't about showing the track. It was really about getting the Grenadier out there and onto some different tracks, different terrain, and testing it out. So sections like this actually went for a lot longer than what you're seeing on camera. I've just sort of left a couple of snippets in to illustrate, but yeah, there's a good couple of kilometres of track that is just like this with bush on both sides of the track brushing past your vehicle. At least a couple of kilometres. Luckily we didn't meet anyone coming the other way, because I honestly don't know what you do. There's very few spots you can pass. So yeah, as I said, I was editing this fairly tightly, so we've just covered about 4 or 5 Ks to the Tea Tree Spur turnoff, about halfway from the top of Hart Spur Track to Mt Selwyn. And as you can see, this section doesn't open up any more than the previous. Still very enclosed. A couple of spots like this, but you do have some very long sections there where it's quite tight. Quite as tight along here. Now it was along this section before we get to Mt Selwyn that I had a moment of panic and wondered if I'd broken something. Listen for it. Sounds like a metal on metal sound. Now, we've all had a stone in behind the disc brake guard and the rotor. This didn't sound like that to me, and it also didn't make sense to me that it would have happened just here.
Yeah, it's something
because
in between
there wasn't a lot of loose gravel flying
something
around on the track.
The, pads and the forward. Like,
So
quick
Dave's
forward.
just had a look under there for me, and he reckons he can see something maybe between the pad and the rotor.
That one, yep, there you go.
So just rolling
Yeah, this front
slowly here
It sounds like it's coming
while
from there
Dave's
too.
outside the
front
car
pad.
trying to listen to see where that sound's
Dave?
actually coming from.
Go forward.
I was just hoping like a bearing or something hadn't collapsed.
That's weird. Doesn't sound like it's come from the pad.
And yeah,
Go
with that
forward again.
metal on metal sound, it was very hard to pinpoint where the sound was actually coming from.
This side too. Both sides.
And it wasn't encouraging
come
when
forward.
Dave said to me he thinks he can hear it on both sides,
Both
because
sides.
the chance of getting a stone stuck
That does,
both
that doesn't make
sides.
sense.
So, you know, we couldn't definitively diagnose it, so I did what I always do. Drive on. And this went for a bit longer than you're sort of seeing on camera, of course. But then that happened. And it was just gone. So we ended up deciding that we're pretty sure it was just a stone between the rotor and the guard, and that driving along has worn it down and it's fallen out. No one on any of the Grenadier groups has ever had a sound like that before. Everybody just reckons, yeah, look, you've got a stone or something up between the rotor and the guard. So yeah, that was my my small moment of panic taking my new car off-road for the first time. So once we're sort of past that, we just continued on. The track opens up a fair bit as you get closer to Mt Selwyn. So our plan here was to head back to Mt Selwyn and then along T3 Range Road. So yeah, we've just passed the access to Mt Selwyn on the right there, so we've just covered another 6-7 k's. And this next section I do cut pretty quick because I've driven this a lot. So we've gone past Water Spur Track, and we're heading around the southern side of Selwyn here to Selwyn Creek Road, and making our way towards the Twins Jeep Track. So yeah, cutting a fair bit here. These are basically all just two-wheel drive roads, access roads in and around the Mt Selwyn area, and they're all pretty easy driving. So yeah, just coming along the Selwyn Creek Road to the western end of the Twins Jeep Track. So the plan was to head along Twins Jeep Track here up to Mount Murray. So I've driven the Twins Jeep Track a couple of times. I do think west to east is the best way to drive it, and that's what we're doing today. Starts off with a nice bit of a climb. It's pretty straightforward though. Twins Jeep Track's got a medium rating on the HEMA maps, and yeah, look, I'd call it medium to easy. Generally the track's in really good nick. There's a few little lumpy sections, a couple of sections with a bit of a climb to them, but nothing overly difficult. See through here, this is a bit of a climb and it's a little bit lumpy in places, but not what you'd call difficult. So that's probably why it's got the medium rating. It's not too long though before the track pretty much turns into a two-wheel drive bush road. we're making pretty good time. Sections of this are almost a ridgeline track. You can see here we're almost at the top of the range there, and here we are getting very close to the top. We're actually crossing over from one side to the other. So some great views there off to the left, and a very steep drop off on what is not a super wide track, but very scenic and a fantastic drive along here. Now we're very definitely driving a ridgeline track right up on top of the crest, with it falling away to both sides. So about 6 kilometres along the Jeep track before we turn off to the Mt Murray track to head up to Mt Murray. Just taking it slow and steady there, enjoying the view actually. And yeah, look at that, just opens up in front of you as you get to the end of this section of the ridgeline. Whole range sort of there in front of you. Just fantastic. Now we're coming along here where the Twins Jeep track joins the Mt Murray logging road. That's the Mt Murray logging road there on the left. And we're continuing now on the Twins Jeep track. Have driven the Mt Murray logging road probably 4 years ago, so should drive that again sometime. And coming up here on the Mt Murray track north, which has been closed for probably 2 years at least now, apparently needing repairs. Apparently there's some fairly big bog holes and what have you on that. I don't know that I've actually ever driven the Mt Murray North track. I think by the time I was looking to go and drive it was already shut. So good little bit of a climb along this section of the Twins Jeep track, and we're just working our way. It's 3 k's from the Mt Murray North track turn off to the Mt Murray track up to the summit of Mt Murray, and pretty sure that's Mt Murray there on the right that we're looking at. One of the seasonal closure gates, and the Twins Jeep track is also a track that is seasonally closed. And yeah, turning circle on the Grenadiers is something you can see there. I started wide and I finished wide. Now people have tweaked the steering a little bit to get a little bit more articulation out of them. That's not something I'll be doing. They've designed it to have a reduced range of motion to make it stronger and more stable and less prone to breakages, which is fine with me. If I need to do a 3-point turn, then that's what I need to do. But yeah, there are options for adjusting the steering that some people are choosing to do. So yeah, another scenic ridgeline section of track through here. Just never gets old, this sort of scenery to me anyway. And yeah, this has ended up as a fairly long video, and I've compressed a fair bit into it. Because I'm keen to get into the Flinders trip and share that with you guys as well. Good little bit of a climb here with a super steep drop off on the left hand side and some great views out there as well. That's why I say, you know, the Twins Jeep track is well worth a drive, and I do think west to east is the way to do it. You can stop off at Mt Murray on the way, and then from the Mt Murray track back to the Great Alpine Road, you've got 14 k's. So just reaching the Mt Murray track here, so turning right to head south to Mount Murray. Good little rocky climb on this initial section. But yeah, if you follow the Twins Jeep track to its eastern end, depending which way you're going and what your plans are, you can either jump straight onto the Dargo High Plains Road, head south assuming you're outside seasonal closures, or you can head north and get on Guns Track and go over Mount Sugarloaf. That's a cracking drive. Or you can head up to the Mount Hotham Resort if that's what you want to do, or over to Omeo. Good steady climb here. Great views off to the right. Pretty good surface as well. And once again, Grenadier's just doing this. No fuss, no muss. Not a difficult drive up to Mount Murray. Again, I think the HEMA maps rate this as medium, and that's probably because it's reasonably steep with that big drop off on the side. So little ridgeline section here. Again, great views, and that's what I love about this part of the high country. You're going somewhere, but the journey there is almost as good as the destination, really. And yeah, looking straight at Mount Murray there ahead of us. You can see the Mount Murray track working its way up the side there, and that's exactly where we're heading. Again, good steady climb, a little bit loose and rocky on top of the track here. You don't want to have somebody following too closely behind you. You generally will spit a few rocks out climbing this one. Getting close to the summit now after that steeper section of the climb. Now the interesting thing is, I think where you come up here is actually the Mount Murray summit, just here where the track bends around to the right. I think, and there's a little campsite here, campground. I think this is actually Mount Murray. Now I always thought Mount Murray was the second one over here where there's a little rock cairn there, but that may not be the case. Now this track is seasonally closed, but even when it's not, I've been told by a few people that gate there has been locked. So obviously it wasn't locked when we came here. And I always thought, yeah, this second hill here that seems to be the highest one. It's marked on the HEMA as a helipad. I always thought this was Mount Murray, but it may not be. It is definitely the high point though on the topos. It's marked at 1,640 metres. Nice little climb up. Got mini rock step there. So maybe this whole thing is Mount Murray and it's just got a couple of peaks. I'm really not sure. But either way, when you get up here, the views are second to none. Look at that. How good. Not talked about as much as Blue Rag and Billy Goat Bluff and some of those other ones, but Mount Murray I think is a must-do for any high country adventurer. I mean, just look at that. 360-degree views. Almost as far as you can see. Outstanding. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed the trip up. Now in order to wrap this up and not have too long a video, as you can see there on the screen, we have just teleported to Guns Track Mount Sugarloaf. So skipped the entire balance of the 14 kilometres of the Twins Jeep track. it was late in the afternoon. The lighting here was just fantastic, and Guns Track was looking amazing. So I really wanted to share this with you guys, but I didn't want to make the video an hour and a half long, and I didn't want to save it and have another installment of the first time of the Grenadier off-road. So I've tacked this on the end. We've just skipped about 25 kilometres and we're on Guns Track heading towards Mount Sugarloaf. Fantastic views. Again, this is probably the third or fourth time I've put a video of Guns Track up on the channel. You all know I love this track. It's never talked about by really anyone else. One or two other creators have picked up on it, I think, but this is a fantastic track, a really great drive, and some magic views, and the lighting at this time of day was just unreal. So I've tacked this in, and of course it was a great track to take the Grenadier on as well, being one that I've driven 2 or 3 times in both directions in the 76 and also in the Padge. So yeah, some great climbs here, but yeah, the late afternoon lighting was, yeah, just fantastic. So we worked our way along Guns Track and then onto Guns Creek Track and then on the West Ovens Track and back to Harrietville, and that's where we'll wrap things up. So guys, this has been the shakedown trip for the Grenadier. I've been super happy with how the vehicle's performed. No breakage, just a stone in the yard. Checked the vehicle over and had the mechanic have a look at it just to confirm there was nothing broken. So yeah, at this point we're about 8-9 days away from leaving on the Flinders Ranges trip. So yeah, again, like, this section of Guns Track is just fantastic. One of the steepest drop-offs of any track in the high country, I think, and not super wide, but the view just makes it so worth it. And that lighting at this time of day, you know, you're driving towards the sun, but it's not blinding you because it's sitting up behind the cloud base and just, yeah, just glowing. Anyway guys, we're just about to wrap this one up, so as always, thanks for watching. Appreciate all the comments on the Grenadier. I'm looking forward. As you know, I'm about 6 months behind with editing and posting trips. We've got some amazing content coming up for you. We've got the Flinders Ranges. We've got a trip to South Australia where we show you a part of the SA coast that very few people have covered. We do the obligatory rope and beach board thing, but then we show you some more that I really don't think I've seen other videos on YouTube about. We've got a couple of great high country trips coming up, and we've just recently had some amazing snow trips. So we've got a bit of everything coming with the Grenadier. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel for that coming up, guys. Like this video if you've liked it, and if you haven't subscribed already, please think about subscribing. It's a great way to support the channel, and we really appreciate everyone that subscribes, and thank you to the regulars that comment. And yeah, as I said, we finished up at the West Ovens Track back at Harrietville, head up to get back on the bitumen and head home. So thanks again guys, and I will see you in the next video.